Why, hello there. Welcome to Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. Sit back, chill out, and go on a journey around the world. Justin will discuss tales of hope, discovery, and general irreverence with some of the most dynamic personalities in the travel business. Remember, we do cool shit, and so can you.
Hello, welcome to Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. We are certainly honored you've chosen to spend time with us today. And this week's guest is a safari legend that we're thrilled to have on. Calvin Cottar and his family have been the safari pioneers of East Africa. A brief family history without going into too much detail. They've been in Kenya's Masai Mara for over 100 years now. They started off as a hunting safari operator, and in '65, Calvin's father, Glenn, he turned the entire operation into a photographic safari company, and he opened up the first tented camp in East Africa, dedicated solely to photographic safaris. Initially, we wanted to invite Calvin on not only to tell you about the incredible life-changing safaris that Cottar's 1920s camp has to offer in Kenya's famed Masai Mara, but also the importance behind the operation and why should you care, most importantly. You're giving up your time and we want to provide as much value as possible. Africa's wildlife is disappearing at an alarming rate. That's not bullshit. There are sobering statistics. One of the ones that always really resonates with me, disturbs me more than anything, is over the last 26 years, half of Africa's lions have been lost. And in '94, there were, this is according to the Africa Lion Project, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but in '94, there were 40,000 lions left in Africa. And in just 25 years later, in 2019, there are only 20,000. A lot of this is due to poaching, both on the illegal wildlife market as well as subsistence poaching. And also a major factor is the human-wildlife conflict, which is what we get into. This is an optimistic podcast. It's not doom and gloom, and it's not meant to have a bleak outlook. This is very much a message of positivity. And people, by staying in a place like Calvin's in the Cottar's concession, the older Kessie concession in the Masai Mara, your stay in a community concession like that ensures that the direct revenue sharing agreement that they've established with the local communities carries on, and locals are incentivized to protect their wildlife and to take pride in their land and to use the land effectively and both sustainably for both their agriculture and their own subsistence needs, as well as the preservation of wildlife for future generations. Cottar's 1920s camp in the older Kessie concession also fits within our ethos and model of offering highly off the beaten path places. Kenya's Masai Mara is extremely famous for the National Geographic iconic river crossing of thousands and thousands of wildebeest braving to cross either the Mara or the Talik River in search of grazing opportunities. And when I'm assuming that everybody's seen this incredible footage of these thousands of wildebeest and just sheer momentum moving to the other side, braving very hungry crocodiles and roaring rivers that can just sweep them away, which I've seen with my own two eyes. It's an incredible, incredible sight to see. Unfortunately, in that part of the Mara during the migration season, it's flooded with tourists. And what makes a stay in a private concession like Cottar's so incredible too is that it's really, really far off the beaten path. And not only can you access the Masai Mara National Game Reserve itself, you can also have wildlife viewing, game viewing in your own private concession, which people staying inside the park can't get. And also, most importantly, people staying inside the park, those funds that go to the camps that are operating there go straight back into those camps' pockets as well as the government. So none of it goes back to the community land that's incentivized to protect everything for future generations and themselves. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Calvin, and we'll get right into our chat. And hopefully you find this enthralling, riveting, and it inspires you to consider a safari once we're all ready and safe to travel again. So thanks so much. Without further ado, the great Calvin Cottar, who's coming live from Nairobi with us. And Calvin, I started selling your camp roughly a dozen years ago, and to the untrained eye and the uninitiated, Cottar's is like, it's one of the most romantic places on the planet. And I was wondering, is there a fun story behind your first kiss in the Masai Mara with Louise?
Well, there's lots of stories about kisses in the Mara, and I can say that we got married. We did get married at one of our camps called Bush Tops. It was a pink gin, a beautiful evening wedding, and it started raining at 5 o'clock on the dot. And of course, in our culture, in European culture, it's a disaster. Everyone gets wet, whatever. But in a Maasai culture, and I had 70 Maasai there as well, it was like yipping and yelling, and it made everything wonderful. So the answer is there are so many romantic, wonderful things that happen in Africa, because in Africa, as you know, you're truly human. Your soul sings. Everything works better. You get 10% more in everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, did you say 17 or 7D? 70.
70.
70 Masai. Did everybody jump up and down and the typical incredible Masai visionaries? Yes.
So we all got wet. We had about 70 of my, white Kenyan friends, and actually friends from all over the world, and Louise's and family and everything. Then we had the Maasai from the area joined us. But the difference was that the Europeans' clothes got see-through in the rain. The Maasai's clothes did not.
They were used to it. What can you say? So did you have a specific, like a different wedding outside of Africa to kind of like double dip in both areas?
No. Although a lot of our guests too. If guests who come on safari will do a wedding at home with 400 people and then come and do a private, I'd say emotional ceremony in the bush on a sundowner spot looking over the plains.
Right.
Sometimes which is that happens.
Absolutely incredible, having planned those before for clients. And that's the one that they remember. It's not the one at the city hall or at the church with all the family there. So now, back to the subject of romance, you guys do these amazing bush baths, right?
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Well, the bush baths, they'd been forgotten about for many years because that was something from the past. Now, bush baths existed before the famous bucket shower. As you know, everyone had a bucket shower. But before there was that mechanism, there was just a canvas, shape held by wooden legs, the weight on the deck. So all the weight is, and you couldn't lean back too hard on the wood because it would break. But that is the way my great grandfather in his era used to bathe. If there was no river that was basically deep enough, they would just get the water put up into the canvas bath, and that's how they would bathe. So we decided when we started 1920s camp to make it a feature, and I believe we're the only ones that do it as a regular thing. And it's the most romantic thing you can do on safari, I think.
I would agree, having done those similar experiences before, not at Cottar's, but I think a lot of the sticking point can be like, oh my gosh, bucket showers and things like that. But like, if you offer something like that, people be like, okay, I'm totally doing a tinted camping experience. Totally. I don't need this soulless lodge, so to speak. But
we always do it outside on the veranda. We always do it outside the veranda with beautiful lights and champagne, and it's and two side by side often. So it's like a very much of the honeymoon never stops for every couple. Everyone gets it.
Now, and you're part of the Mara. That's for those of us that haven't seen the older Kessie area or the Mara area in general, you've got these incredible sweeping views that look completely like something out of this world. It's not something that you would typically imagine. And specifically, as this relates to the Mara, for those of us that don't know, the Mara and the greater Serengeti ecosystem, it's so diverse. And what you've normally seen on these National Geographic films typically feature these endless plains with the dotted acacias here and there. You're in a completely remote, isolated part of the Mara, and you've been there for a long time. Can you take us through the story as to how your family got involved in that specific area of the Mara?
Thank you for that question. So the history, as far as I remember, well, when I was about 7, I remember, first of all, my dad was camping there and I was just hanging out the back of his game drive vehicle. In fact, it was a hunting vehicle in those days, because in that area, it wasn't a game reserve. It was still open area. So in the early days before my dad, it was my great-granddad. He used to drive through that area. My great-granddad, then my grandfather. My grandfather brought the first vehicles in. My great-granddad was walking and using like horses and carts. But my grandfather brought the first vehicles in, and they used the crossing right near where we are now. And all I can say is that it's got this wonderful landscape that just cannot be compared. You know, it's all about the true African vista. I believe in the generational memory that we all have. We all come from Africa, but that scenery syncs most with our aesthetic of landscapes. It's got the rolling hills, beautiful. You can see the water, you can see the grass plains, you can see the wildlife in front of you, and it's got a very calming feature. So all I can say is I had to put my place. I wanted to spend my later years looking at that view, because still in that view, there's places I haven't been to. There's still wonder and adventure in corners in that place, that entire view. And it's 180 kilometers with no man-made feature in front of you, nothing. It's just the Serengeti Mara all the way down to the Ololo Escarpment. It's just amazing. Yeah, it's a place that we work hard to keep, because as you know, the Mara is quite over tourism. Yep. And the way we work hard to keep the wilderness feeling by leasing sites that would otherwise be other lodges, and or by conservancy leases outside the game reserve, so that we don't have too many other operators around us, or at least we don't want to deny the Maasai rights to revenue. So we'll have camping operators come in and try to top up the revenues. So we don't control, this is open land, but we work with everyone who have the same ideals of what do people really want. What our guests really want is wilderness with wildlife in it, in the most beautiful setting, in the most beautiful climate, with the most biodiversity you can possibly have. Yeah.
And all of those perfect elements contribute to something that the guests take home just with this magical experience. And at the same time, I think that there's this ethical contingency that's there, because you don't own the land. It's community land, correct?
Correct.
And so there's a direct revenue sharing agreement with the Maasai that when guests come to Cottar's, they know that it's not just going straight back into the pocket of private business. It's going back to the communities. And now, does it operate kind of like Botswana, where you have tenders that expire every 10 years or so?
So the Kenya model is quite different from the Botswana model. Botswana has concession of large areas with the village beneficiary of that area. So there is a government process where you tender and the village gets X amount of value, profit per year, but for extended periods of time, might be 10 years, 15 years, whatever. In Kenya, it's much more of a free-for-all. So inside the game reserve, first of all, is state-owned land. You can get sites in there. There's clearly many sites in there, but I think that is a negative trend, because tourism is voluntary money. When people travel, they put the money wherever the agent is telling them where to go. So a lodge inside the reserve that is not securing land outside where the problem is an opportunity cost for conservation, because that land is secure inside, and it can be funded by treasury, it can be funded by government to government, some aid and that sort of thing. But none of that is available to fund outside. So this is where tourism is very important. So this is why we've always had our lodges outside, our camps and stuff outside of the game reserve on private and community land. And our model is about leasing the land or paying a conservation easement. The conservation easement is a more understandable way of describing what we're doing. paying communities enough money not to do another land use, so that elephants is the crop. I mean, not eating crop, but its existence value is the crop.
Is the crop,
and this goes
so
for,
to speak.
yes. So it's the forest, it's the insects, it's the water, it's not just elephants.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are we're experimenting with different ways of valuing what is this new biodiversity easement that we're talking about? What is the value? Is the land worth more with a rhino on it as opposed to without a rhino on it? So it's still in the Mara Conservancy. So there are 15 conservancies outside the game reserve funded by 40 lodges, all private sector. Although NGOs help fund above the line costs, they don't fund the leasing, which is the below the line cost. We do that. We put our necks on the line for that. And we're just one small conservancy out of 15 on the far southeast. But our plans are to grow out until we connect the Naimina Enkyo forest, which is a huge, amazing old growth forest about 80 kilometers away from the Mara, and a very important corridor for elephants. So we are working hard to generate the money, which can come from tourism, from other sources, to secure this incredible corridor where we have to keep open for about 4,000 elephants a year. On a good year, 4,000 elephants. On a bad year, might be 1,500 elephants. And all that land is threatened by land use change because the Masai, they have to make money off their land. Who are we to say no? And so we have to make the elephants the best way for them to have a better life.
Now, to set size into perspective for people that don't know, I think that tell me a bit about the current boundaries of Older Kessie, and we'll show a map of on our YouTube video of where you plan to expand. Can you give us some numbers, so to speak, in terms of acres?
Sure. So the initial phase 1 is 7,000 acres, and so it's quite small. Phase 2 is about 12,000 acres, which we haven't got into yet. Phase 3 would be about 15, and phase 4 would be about 15, 16, I believe. So I usually think in hectares, actually, but anyway.
Right.
But basically, it's about 60,000 acres in total, looking in Older Kessie alone, to be leased, which is about, $1.8 million that we would have to find every year to pay approximately $50 a hectare a year to secure that as a livelihood income for the 6,000 Masai members of the group branch. Now, they control that land. They have the monopoly on violence on the land. The monopoly on violence, I mean, is that they really have been given the rights by government as a freehold title owner to cut the forest down and put maize, put a fence up, whatever. So they really have the rights to, we should only be talking to landowners in all things conservation. There's no one else to talk to. It's not even the government. It's not international donors. It's actually the people on the ground. What is it that they will do for conservation and not turn the land over? So yes, that is our Older Kessie land use plan. It shows clearly the green area, green hatched, and then 2 yellow areas, and then there's a red corridors that are already converted land that we have to reacquire for the elephants corridor. Yeah.
And that sounds like a ton of negotiating that evolves over time. And you've obviously established trust, having been there for such a long period of time. What is it like negotiating with the Masai?
Well, one thing I know is that I really like negotiating with Masai. I turn into a Masai. Time is meaningless. We sit under a tree and eat goats, and yeah, we have a big braai, a big goat or cow even, and it's a wonderful thing because the Masai, there can be 300 people there, but the decisions are always made by compromise and a consensus. There's never 50% plus one. There's no decisions made. So everyone is a very interesting democracy. Women are not usually included in this, I'm sorry to say, because it's a total patriarchy, except maybe in the village, in the bed. There'll be other powers at play there where the women's rights are inserted. We are addressing all of this women's rights, by the way, in the local community by bringing them into the microfinance schemes and that sort of thing. But so how is it? It's transformative. I do find myself after 6 hours of meeting, just having laughed my head off, got emotional. Everyone gets emotional. But we always listen. We always sit down, and the one guy speaks. Anyone can speak. Anyone can stand up, but one at a time. So you got to let him say his full piece. You can't push him. He can say anything he wants, and it's really quite frustrating at times because there's sometimes. But that's part of the game. If we don't do this work in convincing the people what are the better options other than just subsistence agriculture or goats, then that is our fault. If we don't push the abstract value of wildlife as a better livelihood income for them so that they keep that wildlife, then it's our fault. So anyone in tourism, especially with a lodge or camp in tourism that is not doing this work, I would say they're part of the problem. They need to be out there communicating with the communities about how land can be secured for wildlife, because we are all making in the selling chain, making our income from this. So does it matter that a tourism operator is making money from, 10 elephants, 10,000 elephants, 300,000 elephants? Is there a value to the client that's paying extra because Botswana has 280,000 elephants and Kenya has 30,000? There's that is not the benchmark. So we have to look at how the abstract value works better for the communities generally in tourism.
And educating that opportunity cost, and like you said, it's everybody's future, not just the locals. It's the operators that are there, and it makes sense for that education. Now, back to education, you mentioned the problem, and that all boils down to the human wildlife conflict. For most travelers to Africa on a photographic safari, they would never see an elephant as a nuisance. Talk to me about the on-ground human wildlife conflict and how it relates to the local communities.
So I'll just start with some interesting statistics just so that I can, paint the big picture.
Numbers don't lie.
First of all, numbers don't lie. First of all, only 8% of the country's area is nationally protected areas, national parks, reserves, forest reserves, 8%. But 70% of our wildlife lives outside of that protected area.
Yep.
All of that land is someone's land. It's a community's land, it's a private land. And as the money from tourism is mostly captured 95% in the parks and reserves by the state and by operators who don't have to pay for land outside, and the selling chain beyond that, the calculation is about 0.2% of the total gross, the gross tourism revenues from Kenya gets to landowners with wildlife. So everyone in the selling chain, including ourselves in the history, this is what I'm trying to do is expose no laws being broken. It's because the laws were created from a system of a feudal European system of capture and extraction, which was the royal game concept from Europe. So the lords and ladies owned the wildlife and the land, and the peasants ate potatoes, So if you look at most of Kenya and most of post-colonial Africa, the countries adopted those systems, the wildlife law systems. It's called state ownership. And from India to Kenya, they've got the most extreme state capture value or rights. So if you own your wildlife, if you have land and you have wildlife on land, you can kill it, interestingly enough, by law. If it's affecting your crops and killing you, you can kill it as long as you don't use it. And also the mode of killing is very critical. You cannot use snares, you cannot use poison, you cannot use. So the laws.
When you say use it, do you mean bushmeat?
Yeah, you cannot use it to make money or eat it. That makes it, if you start using it, then you become a poacher. So the animal that's costing you income because it's eating your crops or killed your child, if you kill it and eat it, you're a criminal. Okay. So the laws somehow work. It's a contradictive law. It's a very dangerous law, and that's been the main reason why we've lost so much wildlife and continue to lose wildlife, because it's allowed operators and non-landowners to capture the abstract value of wildlife. Abstract values captured in tourism, hunting, carbon, wildlife philanthropy, charcoal, everything. But if there's no link to the land with the landowners, then they will use that same value to remove it and put something that they can own. They'll use it illegally That's where poaching is. Bushmeat,
Right.
bushmeat poaching, and even ivory poaching mostly is a byproduct, in my view, byproduct of land use change, fundamentally. When you hear of 50 elephants being poisoned by cyanide in Botswana or wherever, Zambia, that doesn't surprise me. When you look at the aggression that people have because elephants affect their lives so much. So really we have to address this in a different way. So human-wildlife conflict, if you look at Kenya, the majority is elephant damage, elephant killing people, eating crops, snakes massively, warthogs, baboons, crop raiding is incredible. There's a very, very good reason why lions are diminishing so fast, because they're easy to poison. You can just put carbofuradone down and you kill everything.
Wow.
Birds, vultures, hyenas, jackals. But do you continue to criminalize the guy putting the poison down? Or do you give them an incentive to keep the wildlife rather than doing the thing that it's eating, cows or maize? Clearly, our experience is that local African communities are more than happy to have wildlife if it is a better income. And this is not this is not blackmail. This is a necessity. Everyone is on the hierarchy of needs. Everyone's on the pillar. I change it a bit. The lower level is the physiological risk. The second level is like food security, just slightly. You might have a house, but you don't have food or water. So all of that. Third level, I chuck out Maslow's idea of emotion and all that, and I put in enough money to pay for your family's continued benefit. So you improve your family with enough money. Fourth level is enough money to, after you've satisfied your family needs, to pay outside of the community. And then you go into the very highest level where most of, I'd say, developed world are. So, and the issue is, how can we leapfrog people from the two lower levels into at least level 3, so that they can join the multiplier economy? Right now, for them to climb from level 1 and 2 into 3, they have to monetize or eat the wildlife and the nature, sell charcoal. They've got to clear the land to put crops on, where all humans before have always climbed. They've always made land available, become centralized in cities and villages. And the land being available was for crops, subsistence crops mostly. I think this is a huge mistake to go the subsistence crop direction, because if you look at Kenya's population, 40% are subsistence farmers.
Right.
Whereas in the West, I think 0.5% of the population grows food for the rest of the population.
Or smaller.
Or smaller.
Yeah.
So we have to fast track the people here, 40%, who have no choice but to, and remember that land is reduced by 12 times since independence. 12 times less land per Kenyan because of population growth and land being used poorly. So we are looking at trying to have the easement model help people climb straight into level 3. Okay. And that now gives them the reason to urbanize and village, come into the centers. And there they learn the new ways of living, which is non-land based ways of living, like you and I are now. Most of the developed world's population sell services and goods to each other for a profit. And the new abstract value is captured. So the tax base will increase just by people living centrally and doing less land-based stuff and more selling services and items as people come into our higher quality of life. Everyone wants a TV. Look, we can't keep poor African communities poor, thinking it's helping them culturally or traditionally. Oh, no, what we need is landscapes to be open. So if the Masai want to be Masai, they can come out of the village where they've got a TV and a car and walk with the cattle right there in that incredible landscape, which we
can have the best of both worlds. Completely.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's no contradiction.
And with that comes in, obviously, with subsistence agriculture, you would imagine that the local communities are building fences, and this has a massive, massive impact on wildlife behavior. Is that true? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So yes, fences are the big problem. And you'll be surprised to hear that the fences are not being built to stop wildlife as such. In Kenya, it's being built to stop the neighbor's cows from eating my grass. But
Oh, okay.
the byproduct is that the wildlife can't walk across it. You know, of course, an elephant can walk through anything.
Right.
However, they will eventually get enough arrows in their backsides that they will die. And this is the difference between human-wild conflict kills and poaching become very blurred. Like how many elephants actually killed, because they're in someone's fields, that's almost justified. You know, even illegally, there's no big hoo-ha. But a poaching incident where the ivory is taken out in a national park, it'll make national news. So it's a really difficult thing. So the goal in our theory of change, we believe that there's 4 things you have to do. Our theory of change, we developed it together with the IUCN. It's an NGO, International Union of Nature Conservation, and Sustainable Livelihood Institute is a part of that. And IIED. So we developed this, and it basically means, it basically advises for anyone who wants to do conservation to approach the community in a theory of change process. This means basically negotiating process, but it's a very structured negotiating process. And we look at 4 things, 4 pathways. Number 1 is pathway A is disincentivizing illegal wildlife use. Yes, you have the ranges. Yes, you have the punishment if you do the wrong thing, guys. So that's the number 2, more powerfully, is the incentivizing an incentive scheme to keep wildlife on the land, which is the easements and leases. That has to be stronger than the disincentivizing. It's just natural that it has to be stronger. Otherwise, it'll never work. Number 3 is land use planning and trying to remove this need for soft edge solutions into a hard edge solution. So ultimately, you're going to have African populations living protected by big electric fences that can stop elephants, and their agriculture, if it is there, will be protected by big fences that can stop elephants. And yet the land outside of that is available for grazing, cattle, and wildlife. And even there'll be areas of core wildlife only, or say around tourism, that sort of thing, where you don't want to have too many cattle. So you have a phased approach. So that's the whole pathway C. So you end up with a big land use plan for the area, and it's much bigger than the conservancy. It'll go, our area is 106,000 acres. Our conservancy is 7,000 acres. We spend more time in the community than we do in our conservancy, just to give an example. So pathway D is all about the villagization and trying to have opportunities for the community, the youth, who are more than 50% of our population now, to actually have other things to do other than cutting trees down, bushmeat poaching, and actually joining the multiplier economy. So vocational training, microfinance, trying to find ways to get impact investors in to fund portfolios of maybe 100 of these small enterprises, because our trouble with impact investors, they've got so much money that nothing you do down here is enough. They're too small for the impact investor from the States. So we're trying to find ways of possibly bulking groups of these small entrepreneurial people in the community into a revenue, some kind of capitalization stream.
Well, so yeah, like you said, there has to be an incentive based in there. There has to be.
Absolutely.
Now, in light of recent events going on, I'm not even going to say the word. I'm sick of hearing about it. But there obviously has a massive short-term, potentially long-term impact on all of this. And what was, I mean, right now, how would, this is kind of a 2-part question. What was the moment where you personally said, oh shit, this is really happening and it's going to affect us right now? And how do you see, this taking part in how it's changing the psyche locally of the landowners?
Wow. Okay. So it was just
sorry for a loaded question.
No, it's great. It's a great question because it's actually it's easy to answer for me. So all conservation is funded by tourism at the moment. The key, I mean, there are many things above the line being funded by other things. NGOs will do lion lights and bee fences and helicopters and ranger boots. None of that matters if you don't have the land secured. The land is only secured by the tourism partner talking to the landowner. Now we have a structure around this. It's called the Masai Mara Wildlife Conservancies Association. 15 conservancies, and I'm on the board of that, which is, I'm very honored to be there. So the answer is really that when the tourism switched off, like literally boom, suddenly we were in hock for, and in Alderakesi, just under 70% of our revenue or finance was from tourism. I had to suddenly look for that money just to keep going, but we did both. We had to cut costs as well as find the money. So our whole direction went into, well, we've got to keep it going. And so it's a knee-jerk reaction, but everywhere, even in Botswana, in South Africa, everyone is asking for money because it's all being too dependent on tourism. So the answer is in two parts. Number one, in the community, and then the second will be tourism. I'll just talk about the effect that it's had on tourism. So please, the community issue is really about the last time that the white guys came and said, we're going to use your land for conservancy, we lost our land, national parks and reserves. Now they come to us and said, but it's with you, it's your land, but we want to pay you to keep it. And they said, okay, well, let's see. We're still in the trial period, by the way, after 15 years in some places. But now it's switched off. They say, okay, now we know we can't trust you.
The skeptics thrive.
All you guys have made money in the busy years. You probably bought, downtown condos or whatever. But suddenly when there's a problem, you have what? You're not willing to pay us? I really understand their logic. And so for them, we have a small window to make sure we raise the money so the leases are paid. And so there's amazing people working at MMWCA level, also at Cottar's Wildlife Conservation Trust is my organization. We work with African Wildlife Foundation, Royal African Foundation, and many others to raise the money. So we're just under halfway there, but we feel that we'll get there soon. I'm confident.
That's
but I'm going to just, and maybe there can be information about that, more details, in the footnotes or whatever.
If you send it to me, I'd be happy to promote that so people can see. I think people will be interested.
Okay. It's got the budget. It's got exactly what we're doing. It's got what it's for. It's got why it's important. Everything. But I would like to add on to this question: what does it mean for tourism? One thing we've learned is that tourism is a good weather friend. It's happened in Kenya before when we had the occasional grenade in a hotel or something in Nairobi, or we had an election violence thing that happened, which is always cyclical, it comes up. But the agents, and they're my friends and I love them, but they'll happily send the clients to Botswana or Tanzania. But we're the ones with our heads on the block with the commitment to the Masai. This is not about our businesses now. This is about the conservancy and the conservation.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So we have to have a new relationship with the tourism selling chain in its entirety, so that countries are not suddenly, community conservation particularly is not suddenly left abandoned when there's a problem. So how that works, it could be a consolidated fund that'll help countries in problems like this. It could be, it could be suddenly Tanzania or Ethiopia next year that can help keep conservation operations going in the interim until tourism can come back. So what this looks like is that like a percentage of profit in the good years that everyone puts away into either a consolidated fund or even into their own, and that those funds are specifically for an area, helping to fund conservation in an area, whether there's war there or not, whether they send even one tourist there or not. It's not enough to say that I'm doing enough for conservation just by sending a client to a place. That is, no, we're all part of this.
It's too fragile.
Profit-making abstract value capture. So it's got to be actually, on my view, it should be on the percentage of profit. Cotter Safaris, my business, does 20% of its net profit into conservation. Others do 6%. I mean, I know Natural Selections do that. I know, many of them do, but these are guys with lodge properties. I'm talking about the guys upstream, the agents and the guys sitting in New York and London. That's who I'm talking to now. We need to consolidate, and I'm sure we'll be seeing movements in this direction soon.
It's really tough now too. Like you said before, like something happens in Kenya and a guest has an agent from that booking into a Tanzania booking or a Botswana booking, wherever. We don't have that option anymore. And when things start getting rolling again, I do think that it makes sense for agents to say, like, okay, when the future of wildlife is on the line, we need to come up with a more creative way to keep that going and work with our partners more implicitly. Now, do you see, I saw recently that Tanzania opened its borders to international travelers. Do you think, in my opinion, I'll go out and say it, I think it's way too soon to even remotely think about that. You've got other people, you've got people that are high risk. You've got not just the elderly, but the asthmatic. My girlfriend's asthmatic. And it's just, I don't think it's responsible right now. I think we need to lay low. This was just in the States. Yesterday was Memorial Day, and you see videos from Lake of Ozarks with a little tiny pool with hundreds of people partying.
I was shocked.
It's so disappointing. It's especially when it's coming from here, and it's not just the States, it's all around the world. I understand that people are frustrated. I'm frustrated too. I would personally like to go out and enjoy my life how I used to, but it's I don't think it's responsible. What do you think, in your opinion, do you have a time frame? Do you have any words of wisdom that you're seeing from your side of the world?
I'm really sorry to say I agree with you about Tanzania. Too early. And Magufuli, the president, has banned face masks. Like, how is that possible?
How is that possible?
I think it's a shame because we often are in selling safaris that go to both countries at the same time. We share a border. Right now, my community chiefs and leaders, their biggest job is trying to keep those borders closed. Tanzania's coming across to buy food, literally trying to keep it closed. That's their biggest challenge right now. And so I think it's too early. I think the Kenyan approach has been remarkable. I think they've had a strong lockdown. Kenyans have been fairly disciplined. So I think they're talking about the possibility of openings. I see flights are ready to go in end of June sometime, but it's always going to change if they decide it has to go on. So it might be July, it might be August, but I would hope by September, October, Kenya will be able to open. We at Cottars feel that we have to provide people who want to travel some certainty that where they're going, everywhere they're going, there is no COVID. We've got an approach that is protection, pampering, 4 Ps, and I'll have to bring that slide up for you at some point.
Yes, for sure.
But basically, it's about protection. So we're talking about doing perspex, barriers between the guide and the clients in the back, social distancing, an isolation tent for staff come and go. Well, they're isolated for 14 days. That for sure, they're not coming out anywhere because staff has to come and go. And even if it opens up, we'll still do this. So I'm just saying that guests will probably travel if they have some integrity behind the promise that we have done everything we can do. So our guidelines and benchmarks have to be higher than almost anywhere. Because if a guy's going to get onto his G4 to Nairobi, get into a private caravan to Cottars and not be in any crowds and be sure that pilot is completely safe, wearing his face mask, and he gets to camp and everyone is doing social distancing and making sure it's possible to quarantine in Cottars, why not? Why not?
Right. Well,
so I think there's hope.
I think that Kenya has, in my opinion, has really been progressive with what I've seen and from what you've said. I think the safari business there, especially with the small camp and lodge owners, the union and the message, you guys seem super united. Listen, I think there's enough business for everybody. And I think people are going to work with who they like, and there's no right or wrong answer. There's some personalities work better for other people. But I think that your ethos, the way that you've been there for so long and you have such a great reputation. And this is not just flattery for the sake of it. I mean, I've sent clients, I've seen the actual tangibles come to fruition, and you have a very bright future, and we will all get through this. I think that like you said, going forward, a lot of the impetus is going to be from the agent side. In terms of sustainability, it can't just be butts in beds. It's got to be something a little bit deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add to that a bit.
Sure.
I mean, I would like to say that we have to generally change the definition of sustainable travel to being focused on how much land or marine space per room a property secures. That means secures from uncontrolled utilization. So that means even marine space, talking to the villagers about, do you keep that reef free from being bombed, being dynamited?
Right.
Do you, what is that narrative? So, and the selling chain can be part of that narrative. We have to actually, in a way, show that the long haul travel being sold in New York or London is actually better for the planet than to not do the long haul travel.
Right.
And how do you get, so that's all about space. It's not just about planting trees. It's about actually securing natural biodiversity, because that's the full whack. You can actually improve natural biodiversity by increasing the tree species in there that are so important, but just securing the space is the major way that you do this. And so I think we need to narrow down how companies are defined in their sustainable narrative. Like, how much do you secure? How much do you secure? Don't talk about being in a game reserve or a national park that's already secured. Outside, if you're inside a park reserve, how much do you secure outside where it's threatened? So it's all about how much is it threatened. That defines if it's valid for this definition.
And how can you establish the metrics? Like you said, numbers don't lie.
Exactly.
How do we measure this? And people will look at that. That's powerful. It's more than just mumbo jumbo sales nonsense that gets lost in translation. So I think that'll speak.
I mean, I've seen some amazing small properties that secure immense amounts of land that are heroes in conservation, but you've never heard about, just because they don't have a big name and a big marketing budget, but they put 20 times their guts on the line than the big guys who take the money to the bank. And I'm sorry, it's true. And I'm not talking about us.
From our side, we've got to say, okay, we know that and we believe in that as agents. But when we go to the client, sometimes the client's like, oh, I want to do what my friend did. But part of when I started this company, it was more of like the bold trend setting efforts where you go to places that are undiscovered and remote. And it's not that what I like to call the cocktail party effect, when people come back from trips and then they talk about what they did. Oh, well, we've got to go to this big place just because it's the biggest, most luxurious lodge, and we've got this. I mean, there are plenty of incredibly deluxe, luxurious properties that do the right thing. There's some that are more bare bones, and I think that it's the message, it's doing the right thing, and it's finding people that are working to actually put boots on ground and making sure that this land and this wildlife and the communities are sustained for future generations. So
exactly. Yep.
So wrapping everything up, we're going to close pretty soon. So I do want to, any parting comments, final words of wisdom that you'd like to encourage clients, give them a sense of optimism?
Yeah. I'll just say that we started out with Africa. That first of all, safari in Africa is not just travel and vacation. It is a coming home at the most deepest level you can experience. So it's not just about going on safari to look at lions. It is actually coming home as a human being. You may not understand this until you actually are there. So that's number one. Generational memory is real. I've seen people cry as soon as they get out the plane and they're in this. Everything is different. And number two, I'd say, I think choose carefully where you're going. Ask, your agents and the agents themselves to ask the lodgers, what do you do for conservation? Truly, like land space. What are you doing? So that we can filter out the properties and actually bring them into the solution to change the way they set the properties that are not doing the right thing. Who may be thinking that paying less to communities is better. You got to do more. It's the opposite. So definition of sustainability has to be changed, to sustainable tourism. And I'll just say thank you. And we're there waiting for you guys as soon as you can get yourselves out there. And we'll be there for another 100 years, I hope.
It's going to be awesome as soon as this. Yeah, you guys will be there for another 100 years and even more than beyond that. So
I hope so.
So
yes.
Calvin, I want to thank you for your time, everything that you've done. And the next time I see you, hopefully it will be under an acacia tree in the Masai Mara with some true, authentic Masai goat milk. What do you think?
Well, not only the goat milk,
the tea,
but 70 Masai around us having a really good powwow.
Good bash. That'll be
fantastic.
Awesome.
I'll make sure it happens when you come out.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Calvin.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Cheers.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Smart Aspirations. Justin Huff is the manager of Swaggy Swan Travel. For all travel-related inquiries, please visit www.swaggyswan.com. That's www.swaggyswan.com and click Inquiries. Have a stupendous day, and we'll see you next week.